Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning into another Supatease video, and we've got PvP tuning incoming for the next reset on November 21st. A huge amount of changes coming through for a lot of classes. Hopefully they're going to hit the right ones, and hopefully nobody is forgotten. Wink, wink. Frosty K here in this update. And of course, if you want to make sure that you're never missing an update, smash that subscribe button. Your support is greatly appreciated. So let's get started. The first round of changes is going to be targeting Unholy Death Knight. Death coil damage is going to be reduced to 70% from 90% in PvP combat. I'm kind of on the side of the fence that Death Knight was fine the way that it was. Is this absolutely going to destroy this spec? Probably not. But I was actually kind of fine with the way Unholy was at the moment. Still, targeting one of the more represented specs likely with this change. The big one here, Havoc Demon Hunter. What is going on? Is it going to hit all of the correct things? Inertia damage bonus reduced to 12% from 18. This was a damage modifying cooldown that was stacking together for massive crits. So this is a good spell to target. Elysian Decree damage reduced by 20% in PvP combat. So just as its base is getting reduced, we'll have to see if this means that other talents are now going to be more competitive, like you summon a second demon when you I-beam, with the fact that all these modifiers together are being nerfed. The Hunt initial and periodic damage has been reduced by an additional 10%. It will now be 30% reduced in PvP combat. Throwglaive is also going to have its damage reduced by 10% in PvP combat. I wonder if Throwglaive should have been nerfed or Soul Scar should have been nerfed, which is the bleed that Throwglaive applies. When you look at details in the damage breakdown for them, I feel like Soul Scar is usually more significant than the actual Throwglaive. But obviously, when you're shooting 3 Throwglaives when you blade dance someone for 400,000, that's likely going to be a pretty big deal when they're all stacked together. So it's not the worst change. Essence Break damage bonus reduced to 50% from 65%. This is not a buff. This means that the damage bonus to spells affected is reduced by 15%. So if we take 15% off with the inertia change as well on something like Death Sweep, I feel like it's still hitting really hard. And Death Sweep was like one of the biggest outliers on top of Elysian Decree. So it's likely still going to be, decently strong. Fell Barrage damage has also been reduced by 20%. This was what was padding a lot of damage, overall meters across the board. Their sustained damage is not going to really be felt by these changes coming through. This is targeting down their burst damage, the one-shot potential. So they're probably still going to be scaling scoreboards a lot higher, but hopefully this means there's going to be a lot less random what just happened moments, and I just died immediately, which will be good. Focusing the classes more on sustained damage, I think, is a good direction. For Resto Druid, Life Bloom periodic healing is being decreased by 12% in PvP combat. Pretty significant. This is the most important spell for the Resto Druid healing output. Grove Guardian's Nourish healing is also being decreased by 15% in PvP combat, and Grove Guardian's health is being decreased by 66%. So killing the Grove Guardians may become a decent strategy, similar to killing healing stream totems. Maybe training down the Resto Druid and just chopping down their trees as you're going along. If you're maybe a cleave comp, then that can actually AoE the treants. This might be a viable strat. Although with their healing being nerfed on top of it, I'm not sure if it'll be worth the time to kill them. But if you've got like a huge blast of AoE damage that would just run every tree over immediately, that this might be a viable strategy. So again, targeting good spells that were problematic for this class. For Marksmanship Hunter, rapid fire damage is being increased by 20% down from 40, so that's a 20% reduction to rapid fire. Guardians of the Dream 4-piece set bonus now causes your next rapid fire to fire 40% additional bolts, down from 60. And Arcane Shot damage, however, is being buffed by 10%. Chimera Shot damage is also being buffed by 10%. Targeting the spells that allow armor penetration for Marksmanship Hunter is a good move here, and reducing the power of the ability that made mages cry at night every time they went to bed, thinking like, I'm going behind the pillar, bro. Oh, the rapid fire's on me, I'm dead. So I think that this is decent overall for Marksmanship Hunter in terms of improving the health of the game, both for it positively and obviously negatively, because it's going to make it slightly worse, but it's probably still going to be really strong. Holy Paladin was suffering, and maybe you're not going to be suffering any longer, because your mana regeneration is now decreased by 25% from 55, so that's a 30% increase in mana regeneration, which was the main problem that I've seen so far from Holy Paladin. So this is likely going to be a huge help. to you competitively, against all the other healers. Shadow Priest was not forgotten in this round of changes, and I was curious if it was going to be, because it was kind of just like it's there, but it's not really that great. You're getting an 8% increase to all of your abilities. Mind Trauma's duration, though, is being reduced to 15 from 20, so stealing everybody's haste and sucking that away is not going to be as effective, but probably still pretty decently effective. But 8% is a lot better than nothing. For Mage, your Blast Wave Snare is only going to be 50% down from 70, and it seems like with the Mages that they targeted your mobility pretty heavily with this, and this will be one of the first things. So hopefully when you're knocked off Blades Edge Arena, it's not as tilting as getting knocked off and being like perma almost rooted while you're trying to get back to the top of the bridge. For Arcane Mage, Chrono Shift is now only going to increase your movement speed by 25% down from 50. So again, targeting Mages of mobility against melee pretty heavily here. I think this is when you Arcane Barrage that gives you a sprint. It's not going to be as effective. Temporal Shield is also now only going to heal you for 60% of the damage taken over 4 seconds, down from 100% in PvP combat. This likely will make you, more of a target for dot damage and caster damage, which was previously you were really actually tanky to, and not to mention just burst damage as well. You got to be really careful with when you're timing. It's like how much healing am I actually going to get when this temporal goes off? So a lot of defensive and mobility nerfs targeting here towards Arcane specifically. Fire Mage, surprisingly to me, they're kind of reworking it, I suppose. You're going to see some changes here that are going to jump off the page and be like, wait, why are they doing that? Ignite damage is increased by 20% in PvP combat. Fireball is being buffed by about 8 to 18% in PvP combat. Scorch is getting buffed by 65% in PvP combat, but the Glass Cannon talent will now only increase the damage of Ignite, Fireball, and Scorch by 40% from 100, and decreases your maximum health by 15 down from 20. I think they're trying to reduce the necessity of Glass Cannon so that, in situations where it wouldn't be ideal to run this, something maybe like Death Knight and a Hunter running you down, you don't have to run it. Your damage isn't going to be completely neutered without it, but if you can get away with it, it's going to give you a little bit of a benefit. So I think that's going to feel good overall for Fire Mage. For Frost Mage, Flurry is just getting a 12% damage increase. Frozen Orb damage is getting buffed by 45%. Frost Bomb is getting an 80% damage increase. Ice Lance is getting a 20% increase. This will likely compensate for losing your set bonus from last season. Comet Storm is getting a 25% damage increase. Freezing Winds now grants Fingers of Frost every 5 seconds, up from 3 though in PvP. And Frozen Orb now has a 5% chance to grant Fingers of Frost, down from 10. So your RNG damage is going down, but when you get that damage, it's going to feel a lot more spiky. And honestly, this RNG window is not really, I don't think this is going to be too significant. Maybe it'll matter more with Frozen Orb against something that doesn't have a lot of pet classes, but there's a lot of pet classes that are viable right now, so you probably won't notice those. You'll just notice the buffs, and I'm wondering how hard Frostbomb is going to hit with an 80% increase. For Mistweaver Monk, we are seeing Rising Sun Kick damage decreased by an additional 16%. Blackout Kick from Teachings of the Monasteries damage has been decreased by an additional 25%, and Tiger Palm damage has been decreased by 20% in PvP combat. Ancient Teachings now transfers 275% of the damage done, was 220 in PvP combat. So the healing is going to be the same, but the damage you do is going to be less. For Fistweaver Monks, let me know in the comments down below if I'm reading this wrong, but that's the way I'm reading this right now. Your damage is going to be lower, but it's to compensate, your healing will be about the same. So maybe you're not going to be just running people over, but you can Fistweave against dot classes, but you're not just going to steamroll their Warlock type of deal, but you probably don't maybe want to do it, in situations where it's bad. We'll have to see. Initially, I was thinking this was like a pretty big nerf to Mistweaver Monk, but I think that in the situations where Fistweaver was strong, it's probably still going to remain strong. For Assassination Rogues, King's Bane initial and periodic damage has now been reduced by 20, up from 11. I was actually surprised to see Assassination Rogue get nerfed, because it was looking good, but I didn't know if it was, Demon Hunter level good, but it is getting nerfed. For Outlaw Rogue, Crackshot now causes Between the Eyes to dispatch the target for 50%, down from 75% of normal damage when used from stealth. And Subtlety, Perforated Veins damage bonus reduced to 40 from 50 in PvP combat, and Gormaw's Bite damage has been reduced by 10% in PvP combat. So just targeting rogues across the board, and even though the representation was low in Solo Shuffle, they were actually really strong mechanically and functionally. So not surprised to see some nerfs here for these specs. For Shaman Elemental, lightning bolt damage is going to be increased by, was that 22%? So maybe Stormkeeper is going to be more of a viable option. Chain Lightning is also being buffed by 15% in PvP combat. I don't know if that's enough to make you press it. Ice Fury is getting buffed by 85% in PvP combat. So instead of just only using instant cast spells, Ice Fury is likely going to be a bit more of a priority. So that's going to be nice. For Volcanic Surge, it now increases the damage of Chain Lightning and Lightning Bolt by 30% down from 50. I think this is likely trying to target the one-shot build, maybe, possibly. We'll have to see. But overall, some interesting buffs for Elemental. We don't see anything for Frost Death Knight. I don't know if that means that we're going to have to just wait until when they have time to do a class rework for it. But for the majority, these changes look really good. Hopefully we can get some posts about what's going on with queue times with Shuffle and the changes that they've made, because it's obvious that there must have been some changes made to MMR and matchmaking right now, because the queue times are dramatically longer. And I think it's likely because they listened to the feedback, which was, DPS don't want to queue with lower rated healers, but healers on average are like 300 to 500 rating lower than DPS, and not because they're worse, it's just with the way the system is structured. So now DPS that are higher rated sit enormously long queues. So it may have just been a necessary evil to queue and get healers that are lower than you, just because with the way the system is, if you look at the cutoffs for rank 1, for example, the highest rated healer cutoffs are like 300 to 500 rating lower than the highest DPS cutoffs. And it's just because as a healer, it's harder to get rating, not because those players are 400 rating worse than the DPS players, right? So it might be a necessary evil to go back to the way it was in the previous season, just to help alleviate some of these painful queue times. Like I'm seeing queue timers up above an hour, above 2 hours. But overall, these class balance changes look really good. They're addressing a lot of stuff, and hopefully for some specs that seemingly didn't make the cut this time around means that hopefully there's a rework in the future for you. But other than that, thank you for watching the video. I hope that you enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next one.